Our first speakers are David Hine and Don Reed. David Hine is a principal engineer with Applied Research Associates in Toronto, Ontario. He is responsible for the Transportation Asset Management Group, working with various government agencies and public-private partnership concessionaires in preserving and cost-effectively extending the service life of their payments. Mr. Hine was the principal investigator for the development of asset management tools for the Canadian Federation of Municipalities. This compilation of best practices, guidelines, and tools included timely preventative maintenance, priority planning, and programming for pavement management applications, and thin surface restoration techniques for bituminous pavements. And Don Reed is the paving and right-of-way manager for the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County, Tennessee. Mr. Reed has been responsible for managing Nashville's 5,800 lane miles of roadway infrastructure. Under Mr. Reed's management, the City of Nashville has implemented several pavement preservation processes that have extended the life of Nashville's roads. Mr. Reed also teaches at a TTAP workshop on pavement management, pavement distresses, and pavement product evaluation. Prior to joining the City of Nashville, Mr. Reed worked for the Tennessee Department of Transportation for 15 years in their long-term pavement preservation program. So let's welcome the two to give their talk.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the City of Nashville. I hope you all are enjoying yourselves in the conference. It's a really nice turnout, and we're glad to have you here. Our presentation this afternoon deals with adapting pavement preservation strategies to significant changes in economic conditions. And what that means is we're talking about the flood of 2010 and what that did to Metro's roads and how we used our pavement management system to manage the condition of our roadways and come up with a method to get our condition back to where it needed to be. In 2010, Metro Nashville Network, we have 2,400 centerline miles. We have approximately 5,800 lane miles. We have more lane miles of roadway than in the entire interstate system in Tennessee. Tennessee has 5,200 lane miles. So we're a county government. So Nashville, Tennessee is Davidson County, and we manage all the roadways. In May of 2010, we had a flood, and most of your stormwater infrastructure is designed for a 100-year flood. We had what was called a 1,000-year flood, so it was off the charts. Over 13 inches of rain in one storm. And for all of you who were at the live demo yesterday, that's Nissan's, it was LP Field, that's Nissan Stadium now. So that entire area where we were yesterday looking at the demos was flooded, was underwater. All of 2nd Avenue, downtown Nashville, was underwater. So it was major damage. It got into the pumps out there by the field, and it caused all kind of damage. That's Bellevue, which is on the west side of Davidson County. If you're coming from West Tennessee, Memphis, and those areas, the interstate was totally underwater. So there was no way to get into Davidson County from west side of Nashville. I just happened to be in Memphis when it started raining, visited my mother-in-law. It started raining, so I decided I needed to get back. And when we got right outside of Dixon, State Route 46, everything stopped. So there was not an interstate or a state route to allow you into Nashville, Tennessee. And so when we finally decided to get into Dixon, the entire state route was loaded with tractor-trailer trucks. All of the hotels were full. It was a catastrophe. It was major. So we finally made it home. And this is what we made it home to. I mean, the water just picked roads up and literally lifted them off the roadway. We've got pictures where it picked a house up and just set it in the middle of the road. And so this was the kind of damage, I mean, major damage. So we had to get busy. And one of the first things we did in order to deal with FEMA is go out and find out where all the damage was. So we reported over 1,500 locations of damaged roads. Then the next thing was, it was from an emergency standpoint, we as Metro Public Works had to get the roads back open for emergency vehicles, for ambulance and for fire trucks. So that was the first task. We couldn't wait for FEMA. We had to get the roads back open. So that was the emergency response. We had to restore the roads to service, and then we had to develop a long-term response plan. Evaluating the impact of the flood. To evaluate the system to determine the types of pavement damage caused and how it affect our overall OCI from 2010 to 2011. The way our pavement management system works and the way we evaluate it, we have a pavement condition index, which most of you know. We use the American Standard testing method 6433 to evaluate distresses. We look at IRI, and we also look at weathering. We look at weathering for pavement preservation consideration. We collect pavement condition data on all of Davidson County. We collect half the county a year. So every 2 years, we have a full condition assessment of Nashville, Davidson County. We have images of every stitch of roadway in our county, every 20 feet. And we do this we do half the county every year, so every 2 years we have a complete assessment. The way we come up with our OCI is 75% of our pavement distress is calculated into the formula. We use 10% of our IRI, which is roughness, and we use 15% of raveling to come up with the overall condition index. For bond ratings and for GASB 34, you have to have a standard, and our standard is we want our OCI to be greater than 70. So no more than 30% of our roads will ever be in a poor condition. We want to always maintain 70% of our roads above 70. So that's what we report to finance. So when those numbers change, when we get more than 30% poor and we start getting below 70, then the finance folks call me and say, Don, what are you going to do to get your roads back to where they need to be? And that's what happened when the flood hit. In 2010, you can see the condition ratings. In 2011, you can see how it decreased. Those are the ones that are above 70. In 2010, 69.8, we were just 1 point below. In 2011, we were 52.8. So we lost a lot of ground after that flood. It was major. What happened? What happened that caused our condition rating to drop? There was 100% increase in potholes on our infrastructure. And some people call them potholes. What I call it is the delamination of that top surface. The water totally peeled that top surface off with the running of the water, and it was everywhere. And according to ASTM 6433, even that delamination is considered a pothole. So they were everywhere. It was 100% increase. And that shows you all the damaged locations. Every part of the county was affected. And that kind of shows you pictures of what I'm talking about. That's 2008 image, and then 2011, you can see a pop out where the water had caused it. Same thing, 2008, 2011. So these potholes wreaked havoc on the condition of our roadway. This is a deduct curve. This is the curves that you see from ASTM 6433. And what you have here is the deduct values for a pothole. A pothole has the highest deduct value than any other distress in the distress manual. If you look at the curve, you go over and you're like 1%, you go up to the deduct. If you got a brand new road and it's 100, and all of a sudden you start having potholes and say 1% pothole, you go up you're deducting 50 points off of that 100. So your OCI has dropped below 70 just like that. And when you compare it to patching, you can see the curves are a lot lower. So there's not as much deduct value from your OCI than what a pothole causes. So that's what happened in a nutshell. So what do we do now? I'm gonna turn it over to David Hine right here, and he's gonna get in a little bit more detail about gas.
Awesome. Thanks, Don. So oops, sorry, that's me. So the major issue now is we've got a huge number of potholes in the thousands, literally everywhere. These are basically taking away from the condition rating of the roadways. We've got a requirement that they have to be less than 30% below the OCI of 70. Some of the roads had few, some of the roads had quite a few. And so the issue is, what do we do? How can we do something, number one, to preserve what we still have? And so we don't want more distress happening and potholes getting larger. And how is this going to affect the impact on the overall network of the system? So basically looked at what the overall condition index was, and in 2008 and beyond that. Ultimately, because of the potholes, we got this significant decrease in that OCI, and we need to do something about it. So if you look at particular locations here, the values of the network, you've got 95s in 08, you all of a sudden got to drop to 47. And again, this is because of the potholes and the severity of those potholes. And looked at what can we do about this. So you can go fill it. It's not a long-term solution. We're looking for something else that would be a little bit longer term. Looked at different patching methods to improve it, and that's what we basically implemented to help raise the overall condition index from the low values that we had in different locations. So the process basically is to use what's called an infrared patching technique. Many of these potholes were literally, as Don mentioned, surface delaminations, and so if we can get something that's going to bring it back to a reasonably decent patch, not just dumping some cold mix or something into it, it was going to help increase the condition ratings of the system. So ultimately what happened was, and I'll show you in a second what was physically done, but the implementation of this process, after looking at others, we could go out and say mill and overlay some areas that had quite a few of them, but then the money wasn't going to go very far. So we don't have all of a sudden big gobs of money to spend. We want to use whatever we had in a most efficient fashion. So ultimately, as Don mentioned, a lot of these delaminations, these potholes were really delaminations. Some of them had structural issues with them as well, and the technique wasn't used for all of them, but for the most case, it was a failure of the bond between the individual layers. The water got in between them. It basically helped debond the surface layer, and we ended up with this delamination / pothole, as was identified by the Pavement Condition Index. So full depth reconstruction was done for, so they literally went out and you saw the map there. Everything was identified. They basically implemented a system by which the county went out and inspected them all. They developed an application, a phone app basically to do this. Their inspectors went out, took a picture of the pothole before the repairs that were done, was basically identified location, GPS right to a map. The stuff from the GPS map was then dumped down to an Excel spreadsheet. Spreadsheet was then given to crews that went out and basically identified the locations, back up one step. From that spreadsheet, basically, their inspectors went out and actually looked at it, determined whether or not this infrared patching technique would be suitable for it, or whether it needed to be, a base failure, a dig out the whole area and replace it. They then physically marked the locations on the roadway. That data was then, again, back to the GIS map, sent to an Excel spreadsheet, sent to the guys who were doing the physical work, and they went out and did the work. Once they did the work, photograph of the stuff, the completed patch, back again to the GIS system so they know that the work was done, and they were basically paid based on the square footage basis of the area that was marked out. So you couldn't have a contractor going out there saying, well, 4x4 is not right, it should be 6x6 or something like that. The idea is to do as many of these as you could with the money that you had available, such that we're going to have our maximum increase in our overall condition index for the system. So basic technology was infrared patching. Going out there, heating up the existing asphalt. It's like a mini hot in place recycling type deal. Soften the asphalt around it, rake it, add some new material to it, basically, and compact it. So there's your identification of a delamination / pothole. You can see that there's been a bit of cold mix put in. Some of that was done just for safety reasons, but ultimately that was the area that was marked out. You've got the infrared equipment coming behind. There were, correct me if I'm wrong, Don, 3 crews out there doing this. So there were three crews doing this almost full time. For how long, roughly? Yeah. Okay. So 3 crews for that's a great contract, guys. If you're out there as a contractor. So anyway, there was lots of things to do. So that's what happened. So they raked it, basically, put in some new material, heated it, reheated the areas, and then compacted it. So it wasn't drive your truck tires over this or anything. This was done with a roller, and you can see the quality you see on the right-hand side. So if you look closely at the right-hand side picture, you're going to say, well, you didn't fix the whole problem, because you can see alligator cracking and stuff around the patch. Well, ultimately, it was to fix the delamination to increase the OCI. So this is not a totally permanent fix. This is at least something that's going to help get those numbers up as fast as possible so that they be compliant with their bond requirements and things like that. So the program increased very rapidly. It was about $5 a square foot to do this. About $1 million a year was done in infrared patching. 1,660 patches done in 2013, so this is quite a few. How many a day can one of these crews do, roughly? 30 to 40 a day. That's pretty decent production to get that done. So bottom line is that they had contracted this work out for the first little while, and in 2016, this year is the first year the county actually purchased their own equipment, are using their own staff to go out and do this work. So they got trained and taught how to do this. There are so many still there that they need to get this done, and they're trying to reduce the amount that's subcontracted out to contractors, and then keep the control of quality and stuff in-house. In terms of the performance to date, that's the increase in OCI you see on the right-hand side, or the big drop, first of all, after the 2010 flood. And this is really catastrophic. If you look at the value lost in infrastructure of the roadway infrastructure, it's a huge number. And so wanted to try and get that stuff up there back to 70 as fast as possible. Not all of these are going to last a huge amount of time. Some of them still got overlaid as a part of the regular resurfacing program. Some of them, and again, they were all selected based on the probability of them succeeding, of course. And so it has been an effective way of literally preserving what they had until they can get to the point where they can do something a little bit longer. So it's definitely a pavement preservation technique. Ultimately, this was a huge economic impact that wasn't expected. The county does great work in doing pavement preservation, and Don's like a bulldog out there trying different things and trying to find out what the best thing that can be done for the road network. And as he mentioned, it's an extremely large one at 5,800 lane miles. So this was a huge economic impact to the group. The number of potholes increased tremendously, and some still continued to happen after the flood happened, so there were some issues with that as well. Ultimately, it's something to help preserve it until such time as more money can be spent on it. The only way this worked was part of the overall pavement management system, showing what the impact was, showing what needed to be done, or identifying what was best able to be used to fix it and bring them back to a decent condition. And the fact that we had a pavement management system, you've heard this in a number of different presentations here over the last couple of days, is you need to document what you have, what its condition is, and this was then used to help predict what the impact was and what the need was going to be. So without the data, you really can't do a heck of a lot. You need to have that data to help identify the problems, identify the fixes, and then document those fixes that got done. So it's a really decent way to do this. So ultimately, the proper system that would be implemented, it has the data to support the decision-making process. We were able to literally, once the potholes are done, live load that data back into the pavement management system and show the impact of what happened as a result of the program. It's done on a regular basis. The data is not like once a year or once every 2 years. It's like real time. It's live impact, and so you can see what the impact of the work that's being done. Ultimately, this was a successful process that was done here. It was done prior to the flood as well, in terms of the work that was being done on other roadways as part of the program, but nowhere near as big as what was done because of this flood ultimately. So bottom line is, that wasn't a problem that was expected, and they were able to react based on the issues. The bigger ones that we showed you in the earlier photographs, they were definitely not dealing with potholes. Those are bigger reconstructs and whatnot. But it is successful. It is proving to be cost effective. And any other final thoughts? Awesome. So it's been a successful program, so they should be proud of it. Questions from anybody?
Do we have any questions for either?
We're good.
Thank you all.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.